Hello, I'm Philip Muggleston, and in this series of videos we're covering the predictive capabilities native to SAP HANA. In this video we're going to continue to look at data preparation. This time we'll focus on sampling. Sampling allows us to reduce the volume of data that we input into our data mining process. Now, sampling is something that used to be done pretty much all the time in the past, particularly when hardware and software resources were not so great. But these days with HANA, there is much less desire or need to do sampling. You can work against the entire data set. However, when you're working with a new data set and you're developing an algorithm, maybe to save time you want to run against a representative sample just to understand the data better. And there are some situations where it may be undesired to work against the entire data set and using a sample makes more sense. So let's have a look at our customers table. We can see we've got about 150 customers here, and what we're going to do is some simple examples of sampling this data. We have customer ID, name, and then we have 4 independent variables. So sampling will allow us to take all of the columns here, but just reduce the number of rows, and we can do that in different ways. So, as always, here's an example I made earlier. It's very straightforward to use sampling. We always use the AFL in terms of creating a procedure. We simply need to give the input data structure. So this is where we're creating a table type for data, which represents the table we were just looking at with our 6 columns in it. We have the parameter table, and then we use the signature table in our definition using the AFL wrapper generator function. So let's go ahead with running that. We're going to use the sampling area of the PAL library, and we're going to create a procedure which we will call PAL_S. That's our name. So let's go ahead and run that with our initial setup. Now it's up to us to start doing some application level work. So what we can see here, we need to create an empty table to put the sampled results in, and for that actually we can just use the table type as we saw before for the results using the input data, because we're keeping all the columns, the structure is actually identical. And we create the parameter table and populate the parameter table. Now in the parameter table for sampling there are a number of different values that you can tweak. They allow you to do sampling in different ways. In fact, there are about 8 different sampling methods available with this procedure in the PAL. We'll see some of them. And you can choose to either sample based on the number of records you'd like to get returned, so the number of rows effectively in the data set you'd like to have when it's been sampled, or you can say give me a certain percentage. For example, here 0.33 represents 33%, 1/3 of the entire data set. So if you don't know how many rows you've got, or you just want to say take a percentage, you can do it that way. But you would typically use either the sampling size or the percentage. You would not use both. And of course the thread number we've seen in many algorithms allows you to define how many threads the HANA server will use as it's performing this sampling process. So let's go ahead and run this code to create our tables and to set our initial parameters. And now we can go ahead and make our first run. So let's go and run the procedure. We're going to effectively use sampling method 0, which means give me the first set of values, and we're going to say give me 10. So give me the first 10 values out of the table. So let's run that. Okay, it's run. Now to save time, as we may run this several times, I've just created a little select statement here that will show us the results. So we can run that automatically in the future. So what we can see, we've got the same 6 columns, but we've just got 10 observations or 10 rows. And we can see from the ID, because we have IDs from 1 to 150 here, that we've got the very first 10. So that makes sense. That relates to we asked for the first 10, and we used the method of 0. Now in fact, as always, you're probably fed up of me repeating this. Do go to the HANA PAL reference guide. There you'll find all the details on what the different methods are. For example, the first, the middle, the last, and how to set them with the parameters. I don't have time to cover all of those details in these short videos. So we've seen that example where we got the first 10. Maybe we want to now run another example. Perhaps we want to get the middle 10. So here we can set the sampling method to 1 and Then clear out the result table as always and run the procedure, look at the results. And now we can see we've got 10. However, it's starting at 71 to 80. So it's actually from the middle. It's about the middle of 150. Half of 150 is 75. We've basically got the middle 10 observations in that data set. And we could also set it to a value of 2, which would give us the last 10 values. So see, starting from 150 going down to 141, we've got the last 10 values in that data set. So it's very, very simple to see how we make that work. And of course, if we wanted to increase the number of values to be used, we could do that. We could, for example, set it to 15. So let's do that. And this time we're going to choose sampling method of 3. And 3 means give me every n, or every 15 in this case. Give me one record every 15. So it's not taking a block as we saw before, but taking it more stratified across the data. So let's run that example. And now we can see we've got 15 rows returned. So we've got a sample of 15, and we've got the 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. We've basically got one across. It's taken every 10 across the data. So it's done a slightly different approach every nth, effectively, based on the sampling size we defined. Now, if we wanted, we can also ask that it creates this sample randomly. So, for example, if we use value number 4, again taking a size of 15, sampling method of 4, we can see this time we get 15 in our sample. However, the numbers of the IDs shows you that actually we're going right across that data set and picking out effectively at random. And there are different options within this PAL function to allow you to call at random with or without replacement. In fact, there are even more complex options that allow systematic and stratified sampling as well. I don't have time to cover those in this short video. A couple of things to show you finally. We have this ability to take a certain percentage. So for example, we want a third of our data. Then what we can do is we can this time use the percentage value, and from my investigations, if you have sampling size and percentage, the percentage takes precedence from what I've seen. So if we now run that example, so we've got 33% we want to get returned, which is about 50 out of 150 rows in our source data. Now we can see we've got a random, because we're using that method, and 50 rows out of 150. So we were able to get a 30%. And just to show you a little bit more about how this performs, particularly on large volumes, because you would normally be sampling a very large volume of data. You may remember that we have another table which is the same structure, but has 1 million customers in it. So if perhaps I want to get at random and maybe get just 1% of the customers, or maybe, let's go for 1% of the customers. So what I need to do here is to update and set, this is a double value for percentage. So I'm going to just set the double value in our parameter table to 1%, which is 0.01. And if we now run that, let's make that update. It's the only change we actually need to make in the parameter table. Clear out the results. We've changed the input table name to be 1 million and run. And now you see it runs almost instantly. It's just fetched as the first 1,000 because we probably have more than that, but you can see it ran very, very quickly. We were able to make a very nice, easy sample, and you can see from the IDs this was pretty much done at random. In fact, if we maybe get to just 0.1%, because 0.1% of a million is a maybe more reasonable number to return, or even 0.001%, if we run that, we'll see actually a smaller number of information returned. So let's run that again on a very large volume of data, and we see we get this time actually 100 rows back, which is 0.01% of the actual initial data source. So that's a quick introduction to sampling with HANA and the PAL.